So the question is, what happens if the economy is fully employed and at equilibrium, and there is a significant increase in government spending? So let's start by drawing this, right? So get a piece of paper out and a pencil or a pen or something that you draw with, and draw an economy that's in full employment, and use the aggregate demand and aggregate supply curves, right? So we're going to start with, drawing a typical graph, right? So if you have your paper there, draw a particular typical graph. So on the vertical axis, put PL for price level, and that's the overall or average price level. On the horizontal axis, put output, and in parentheses GDP, and that's the value of final production that firms are producing. Then draw a downward sloping demand curve, and draw at the bottom, put AD for aggregate demand. But then think to yourself that aggregate demand involves consumption, investment, right? Consumption C, investment I sub G, government spending, and net exports X sub N. Now, then draw an upward sloping aggregate supply curve, a short run upward sloping aggregate supply curve in kind of a bowed manner, right? Where you have a flat area and then rising, and then maybe even going to vertical, right? And then just designate the equilibrium where those two curves cross as full employment. Now, that full employment is full employment at the natural rate. It is not capacity, right? It's full employment at the natural rate. And what that means is, at that level of output, there is a job out there for everyone who wants one, right? So there's enough jobs for job seekers. Now, there's going to be some unemployment at that rate because there are going to be people changing jobs, looking for jobs. Mr. Spinola talked about that. That's what we call frictional unemployment. And there's going to be mismatches, right, in the market where there are too many nurses or too many engineers, or something like that. The supply and demand, technology comes and displaces people. People have to retrain. Structural unemployment. And so frictional and structural unemployment are impossible to eliminate. You can maybe minimize them a little bit with things, but they're relatively impossible to eliminate. So we say, even when there's enough jobs for everyone, not everyone is going to have a job, right? So you have the natural rate of unemployment, which we call the full employment level of GDP, right? Okay. Now, it's not capacity, because you could produce more than that. So now what happens if government spending increases? Well, consider this, that government spending is a part of aggregate demand, a pretty significant part of aggregate demand, right? And so if government spending increases, aggregate demand is going to increase, right? So let's just do that. Let's increase, if we were to increase government spending, we would shift the short run aggregate demand curve to the right, right? If you do that on your illustration, what you're going to see is the equilibrium is going to change. The output level is going to go beyond full employment, and price level is going to rise. Now, those of you that say, aha, now you're producing more than full employment. How can you do this? Well, you can do it. As we discussed in a previous video, that's possible because, you have workers that have a job, but they could work two jobs. And you have workers that have a job and they could work overtime, right? And you have people that might be out of the workforce that could re-enter it, right? So you could get more output, somewhat more output, but it's going to be at the expense of higher prices, because now firms are going to recognize that this demand is going to allow them to increase prices. It's going to put pressure on prices to go up. So what you're going to get in this situation is demand pull inflation, right, and output beyond full employment. Now, without giving it away, we would say that this situation can only endure in the short run. In the long run, the economy will adjust, but we're not there yet. But in the short run, that's what would happen, right? Now, when I come back the next time, after you take this test with Mr. Spinola, when I come back the next time, I'm going to talk about the dynamics of shifts in aggregate demand. And what I mean about the dynamics is it's not as simple as it appears in the illustration. When demand changes, the impact is always going to be greater than the shift in demand because of something called the multiplying effect. Now, that will give you something to look forward to when we launch into chapter 30 in your book, and that's fiscal policy. I hope this is helpful to you. Best wishes to you on your examination or whatever kind of assessment that you're going to have. Make sure you do your own work. Take this seriously. This is important stuff and it's interesting stuff. Good luck to you.